Shove. On today's episode, we have the beautiful Sophie here, who is a mother, an author, a healer, and an amazing doula based in Cambridge. Sophie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, thanks for having me on your beautiful project, Carly. I'm very happy to be here. So my name is Sophie, and I'm as Carly said, a doula, healer, and author of this book called Why Postnatal Recovery Matters. And as you can hear from my accent, I'm French, and I've lived in the UK for 23 years. And how I came to doulaing is an interesting story because I was a scientist, a biology research scientist for 20 years. And when I had my first child, and he's turning 15 next month, so that's quite some time ago, I had a doula, and I went from being really scared of birth. When I went to antenatal classes, when I was about halfway through my pregnancy, I thought, birth is horrible, really painful. Why wouldn't you have the epidural? It's like going to the dentist and all that. And then I hired a doula, and I went to some really powerful antenatal classes run by a charity called Birthlight in Cambridge. And all of that, my doula lent me Michel Audin, and she lent Gaskin, and I, being the knowledge freak that I am, I started reading all these things, and I was like, there's this whole world that nobody ever told me about. And to cut a long story short, I went from being really scared to having a home birth. And the experience was so empowering and so positive. And I was just like completely, my brain got rewired from it, and I then spent the last 2 years probably not very tactfully shoving it down people's throats, because I thought, yeah, everybody should have this, And then I trained to be a doula, and that helped me understand that you cannot shove this kind of things down people's throats, and that home birth is not right for everyone, and the experience of that was so transformative for me that I thought I want to do the same for others, and I ended up training to be. So I trained to be a doula in 2008, and in 2012 I left my big career behind to focus fully on this, and became, there's a whole journey, and I could go on and on about this, but here I want to focus mostly on what, the journey that led me to write this. There is a saying that postnatal is like the little Cinderella, the Cinderella of the birth world. And people usually spend, not everybody, but there's a fair proportion of people who understand the point of investing in birth prep, birth preparation, antenatal classes. Antenatal classes are a fairly mainstream thing now, but postnatal is not something that most people have heard of. And there's two things that led me to write this book and want to change the world around the whole postnatal topic is that first I learned this massage called Closing the Bones from South America. And that led me, because I'm a very curious person, after I learned this part of massage that's designed to nourish and restore. I went to in primary school. I'm lucky in Cambridge because it's super multinational. There's when I told my daughter, you're lucky to speak 2 languages, she went, everybody speaks 2 languages in my class, Mama. And I started asking the moms, so what did you have, especially the mom from Britain, what did you have in your culture? Mm-hmm. And the stories blew my mind. So one of the stories that really stick in my mind is there's a lovely woman called Helen who's from Kenya. When she had a child in Kenya, she said that you don't lift finger, that people would not she said people would fight over who would make her dinner. She said you wouldn't even wash yourself. And in her case, she said the care went on for months, not weeks.
Wow.
And then there's this other woman that she said 4 months. And then there's this other mum from India called Swati, twins at 32 weeks in India. So they were in NICU. But she said her mother hired an old lady from the village, and she had a daily full body massage for a month. Wow. Now, you think that a daily full body for a month, and you look at what we had, and you're like,
yeah.
And she said it made a difference too. She was in a lot of pain from the cesarean, and she said that it made a world of difference, to her well-being and her mental well-being and everything. And I started hearing the stories and collecting all these stories in my head. And then as a postnatal doula, I'm starting also witnessing the other side of the spectrum. On one hand, there was a spectrum of cultures. My husband's from Hong Kong, and they still have a very strong culture of postpartum nurture. So I started like accumulating all this spectrum of like culture that nurture, and then witnessing mothers as a postnatal doula. So the kind of stories that stick to mind in the postnatal doula field in the UK was like being in a new mom's home, the baby's maybe 10 days old, she's gone for a nap, I have the baby in the sling, I've done doing whatever chores I was planning to do, like folding the laundry and emptying the dishwasher. And there's time left, and I think, oh, I know I'm gonna make her something for lunch, like I'm gonna make her some soup. And then I open the fridge, and in the fridge there's nothing. Like there's bare, you know, like there's nothing you can make soup from. And then I turn around, I close the fridge, and I turn around and dotted around the house, there's like maybe 15 different bouquets of flowers. So that's one example where I think, wow, you know, what people are giving to the family is wrong. And then the similar stories from that is saying, in every new family, I'm sure you've had that as a postnatal doula as well, the doorbell rings and it's a gift for the baby. But no gift apart from the flowers, there's no gift for the mother, and there's no gift for the family. There's no people need is like a carol and home cooked food, or like stuff delivered that is actually helping survive in the first few weeks of birth. And so stories like that started accumulating, but also then I was starting noticing other stories, which is how women blame themselves for feeling crap when actually their behavior, you know, what they feel is like a reflection of a society that doesn't support. I would go further, in fact, than saying it's a reflection of a society that doesn't support new mothers. Is reflection is like a symptom of a dysfunctional society. New mothers pay the price for something that is not designed to like function well. And so then I started hearing about the blaming themselves, you know, what's wrong with me. So then there's a story that come to mind is I was with a new mom who had like a 3-month-old and a 3-year-old, and she said to me, I don't understand why I'm so tired. And I said, well, you're tired because you have a 3-month-old and a 3-year-old, you know. Yeah. And she said, but everybody else is coping better than I am. And I was like, no, everybody else is lying.
Mm-hmm.
And so this,
I guess, isn't there, of normal, and what we see as normal on the media and on, you know, the Instagram life is not a portrayal of real life.
No.
And so we don't understand what normal is anymore.
No, and because we feel crap. And I know if I look back on my own, you know, after the birth of my son, I was stuck in that as well. The other thing I often hear women say, you know, is I'm not doing anything. The refrain for that is, the problem is basically when you crap, and you think that everybody else is doing better than you, then you think the problem lays with you. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't allow you to find any solutions, because you're just thinking, well, why am I not happy? Why am I not enjoying it? Why am I not this? Why am I not that? And so the accumulation of stories and from both sides, I started blogging about it. So often I'd come from a new mom's home and she'd say something like that. Like when I was with this lovely client of mine called Claire, I can say her name because Claire's given me permission to share those stories. And Claire had twins, and she'd asked me to help her carry them together in a sling. Mm-hmm. And she did manage that. And so because she looked so lovely with her babies in the sling, and I said, can I take a picture? I took the picture, and then she said, oh, I look fat. And I went, you know, you just made like 2 people. You know, if you look at that, I'm gone. There's story. I see women who were post-cesarean with an infection in their skull, even being, you know, able to be managing that they're doing something amazing. You know, like keeping a tiny little helpless infant alive, despite the major surgery and the injection and all the kind of stuff. You know, like what I keep thinking, imagine if we did treat new mothers like goddesses, and we went, oh, look at what you've done. You've made a whole new person. How amazing. We should treat you like a CEO. You know, we should peel you grapes, and we should just like, you know, the seats there is, you know, like if, yeah, exactly. Like we should just go like, oh my God, you've made a person, you know, you're here. Would you like a casserole? all of that led me to like want to change it. The blogs. So often I would go to a mum's house as a doula, and then I'd come and like, a blog about saying. So I've got a blog that's called "Some Motherhood is Fucking Hard," because it's against stories like that where people just blame themselves constantly, and so the blog wasn't achieving what I wanted because I wanted to change. What I want to do is create a new tradition. So I don't want to return to the good old day because I don't buy into that. And I also don't, because if you're vegetarian and I tell you that the traditional Chinese dish for the postpartum is pig's trotters in black vinegar, it's not going to be great for you, is it? So what I try to do in the book is, there's a chapter on what cultures used to have, including the Western world, because the research I did showed me that this used to be part of the UK culture too, in fact, of the Western culture at large. It's really quite amazing foray into history. For instance, I interviewed, there's a midwife called Becky Reed, who's really, she's well known for having written this book called Birth in Focus. And she told me that when her mother gave birth to her near Cambridge in 1951, the council used to give you a lady to look after your house for 2 weeks.
Wow.
That's in living memory. People don't realize that it's not that long ago we still had something like that. And so in the book, there's a chapter about what culture used to have. There's a chapter about what's wrong in the Western world, about the focus all on the baby, the lack of support for the real needs of new mothers, the fact that there's a completely crazy expectation that you should be back into school for 3 days after the birth, that kind of stuff. Like almost it's a badge of honor if you go to the supermarket when your baby is tiny. Well, so there's that. And then I'd go into 4 main pillars, which are social support, food, body work, and rest. Not in that order, but I don't think the order matters. No. And then I go into how to hire help, as in the chapter is called Hiring Help, should really be called How to Hire a Doula, where I go into the science of why doulas make such a difference. And then I have a chapter on writing a postnatal recovery plan. So that's one thing that I've tried to simplify it for people. If people, just like we talk about making a birth plan or birth preferences, I say to people the same thing. We should make postnatal recovery plans because it's much easier to think through what you'd like to have before the baby's there.
Absolutely. It's something I go over with clients now as well, is to make a postpartum plan. It's, this book is amazing and everyone should read it. And it really does help you to organize how the postpartum period can be. And we've lost community, haven't we? We used to have a community where the elders would come and help, and your aunts and your sisters would come and help, and now we don't have that. It's lost.
Yeah.
And so planning out
COVID had made it even more complicated because I don't know what it's like in your neck of the wood, Carly, but in Cambridge, there's a lot of people who are not from the UK, and so they relied on families from Europe to come and support them, and that's been removed. So I'm seeing, and in the other thing I found worrying is I'm seeing that, how I used to hook up pregnant families with like groups that I knew they could rely on in the postpartum, but now that's been removed. So we need to be very creative, especially as doulas or families, to think through how we can still have some support in place. Mm-hmm. That's where postnatal doulas can be a real lifeline. So one of the creative stuff, I wrote a really short blog on my website that is sort of talking about planning for the postpartum in a pandemic. Because of course I finished writing this book in the beginning of April last year. And I wrote it again now. I would put different things in there. But some of the trying to think creatively through, how am I going to get, social support? How am I going to get food? How am I going to get rest? How am I going to get body work? And there's still stuff that's available, but most people might not know it's there. Mm-hmm. And to think creatively, for instance, that lovely client we shared last summer, she's now supporting another mother locally who had the baby in October.
Oh, that's amazing.
Because you know, in the absence of local face-to-face groups, because there are Zoom, there are Facebook groups, there are whatnot, but people, I don't know how it was for you the first time you had a baby, but I remember I felt so lonely because all my friends were at work. And that was before COVID, but I felt my social network had been removed, and you need to almost rebuild the social network from scratch. And that's why the top reason people attend antenatal classes is usually to meet other parents going through the same thing at the same time. Yeah. Because your friends who haven't got a newborn, they won't, you know, they might get it, but they won't get it. The ones who already have babies, the ones who haven't, they usually don't. But people might, you know, the best people to help you is people who are going through the same thing as you are, and who you can.
You forget, don't you? When you're living in the moment, it's very different to having that moment a year ago, because
you
know it's going to last this long and you'll be okay. But when you're in the moment, you need more support. You need someone to, I didn't sleep either.
I know, to make you feel like you're not crazy.
Yeah.
Because you start to wonder, am I the only one? You know, I remember when my second was born, like many babies, my first had that too, have this like massive agony hour that goes on for 5 hours between 5 o'clock and midnight, you know. And with my second, I was more chilled because I was like, well, I've been there, done that, but also, you know, it's not going to go on forever. So there I was outside in the street pacing with my baby in a sling, who was crying, you know, because that's what they do.
Yeah.
And I bumped into one of my neighbors who had his first baby, and he was doing the same thing. And he said, oh, I thought only mine was doing that. That's the power of peer support, isn't it? That's why I found that, yes, we as doulas, we can help families, you know, rationalize and sort of reframe things, but we can't quite do it the same way as someone who's going through it at the same time.
Yeah.
So I guess that brings into the idea of like also not just postnatal doulas, but the idea of preparing, having a doula in the antenatal period. You know, even possibly regardless of the birth, you know, having a doula for the whole spectrum of pregnancy, birth, and postpartum is fantastic. But having someone who helps you plan for the birth as well as a postpartum, because in the book I make a case that actually how you birth is going to impact your postpartum, of course.
Of course, yeah.
You know, and in all sorts of ways. It could be because you had, you know, a type of birth you didn't plan for and it leaves you feel not so great, or it could be because you end up with some kind of curveball and, you know, you end up with a different scenario, or you stay longer in hospital, or all sorts of reasons. And time again, people are telling me that when they've planned for different types of postpartum scenarios based on different types of birth, then they're prepared, and then they put stuff in. They're not left hung to dry, you know. They're not left with this, oh my God, I thought I was going to get that, and now I've had this. How do I, you know, I can still, just like we say to parents, you know, when we talk about planning all the way, you know, to all the options of possible birth, and that includes, for instance, an elective planned cesarean or an emergency in labor cesarean, and that we tell people that you can still get delayed cord clamping, you can still get skin to skin, you know, those things that you might reflect on and you think, I still got that was important to me. It's the same.
Yeah.
You know, there's a postpartum, regardless of what your birth look like, you still want to have some rest, you still want to have some social support, you still want to have some good food, and you still want to have, you know, body work, some kind of, even something as simple as like having, wrapping your pelvis and your belly with a scarf, and all this kind of nurturing stuff that you can do for yourself. You know, it's interesting because I have a friend who lives alone. She's not a mother, but she fascinates me because she always makes herself really, really good special food. Mm-hmm. She has, we've had picnics where she brought like a proper tablecloth and, you know, like wine glasses and like stuff that I would never bring to a picnic, but I was just really amazed because she makes it very special. That's just who she is. And so it's not a case of, you know, there's no point if you have that, then there's no point having this. It's about trying to think through what makes you feel good. And that's why I'm not giving any prescriptive suggestion in a book. I'm just going like a buffet, you know, because I'm not the one eating the buffet. So I'm the one putting the buffet in front of you. And you want that? Does that feel good? You want this, you know? There was a blog post I read a couple of days ago about slings. And it's an analogy I heard before, you know, comparing slings, choosing a sling to choosing a pair of shoes. Mm-hmm. But what this woman had done in the blog is gone further. She said, imagine you never heard of what, you were from another planet, you never heard of what a shoe was. How would you go to choose a pair of shoes? Because there's lots of different pairs of shoes. There's high heels, there's walking boots, there's flip-flops, there's, you know, all sorts, and slippers and whatnot. You know, there's no such thing as like, here, this is a pair of shoes for you.
Right.
And yeah, so it's trying to hold people through, you know, thinking about what options and what's right for them, what's important for them, what kind of food they like. You know, in terms of the rest, for instance, I think it's just as bad to force people to go to the shops at 3 days old when they're not ready, as it is to like forbid people to get out of their house for a month if they're the kind of person who's going to get cabin fever. Because I've seen, for instance, women from in my village who are from culture where it's frowned upon to get out for the first months, suffering mentally from that. So I quote stories in the book from a woman from Singapore who say, I chose not to have the full tradition thing because I knew it wouldn't suit the kind of person I am. You know, it's about being in the driving seat and firmly choosing, okay, you're the expert in your needs. So you're like, but sometimes you don't know what those needs are until somebody goes, would you like that? Or would you like this? So that's what
the choice, isn't it? And your book is brilliant for highlighting the choices that are available. It's brilliant, and it is a really, really, really good book. And you have so much information in here.
I've made available for free on my website is a PDF, like you can download a PDF simple postnatal recovery plan for free. If you go to the front page of my website. And the reason I've made that is to give people a prompt. So it's divided in 4 areas, the PDF, which are the main 4 pillars of the postpartum. So social support, rest, food, and body work. And I just give little ideas, you know, what you could do this, you could do that, like just as words to simple given prompt in those 4 empty boxes that people can use to start jotting some ideas. Because the last thing I want is people to think, oh, I have to do like this perfect postnatal recovery plan, you know. And I encourage people to, okay, you can download the document and write down, but you could also mind map it. You could also draw it. You could record yourself talking. You could talk to someone about it. You could do a collage, you know, some kind of vision board. It's not about having some kind of prescriptive, oh yeah, you write a bullet point. Yeah. Because this can be, some people love the idea of like bullet point and writing down, but some people find that very dry. And yeah, I think it's
making it individualized.
Yeah. And I think my hope, the reason I wrote the book really is my hope is to see the message shared enough. Because, you know, there's this called a tipping point. I think it's quite low. I've read stats between 17 and 25%. That's all it takes for something to like spread like wildfire through society. Because when 25% of people have done it, everybody knows someone who's done it, and it's no longer like a weird, you know, I've read similar stats about homeless and things like that. You know, when some practices in the UK who had very high home birth rate, then more and more demand grew because people suddenly they all knew someone who had it, and it's no longer some kind of weird thing on the like weird hippies with goddess tattoos.
The feedback that you've got from your book has been amazing. Absolutely. Amazing.
In the book, the research I did about traditional postpartum care shows that there's less incidence of postnatal mental health problems in culture that still have a nurturing tradition. There's absolutely no doubt about that. You know, whilst there will be outliers, like I said, if you feel like your mother-in-law's come into your house from another culture and she's bossing you around, and that's disempowering. That's not going to be great for your mental health. But on the whole, you know, the culture that in cultures that still understand that the new mother is like convalescent almost, and that this care of like holding the person as they hold the baby, there's no doubt that it makes a difference. As to whether, you know, the impact of the prospect of planning inside the Western culture is too new as a concept for it to anybody to have studied it, that would be a fantastic study to make, you know, quite complex, I suspect. But because, you know, again, reframing the idea that a big part of mental health issues is when you don't acknowledge that you feel crap because you think something's wrong with you, so you feel ashamed. You know, I love Brené Brown, and you know, she says shame thrives in dark corners, which is why those stories of mothers saying to me, I'm the only one who's struggling. You know, when somebody's there to say, well, actually, I'm not surprised you're struggling, because what you're getting is not what you should be getting. You know, you're not being supported. So when you reframe mental health, because the first step is that people to acknowledge that they're struggling is often, they feel so, you know, when mothers struggle to, say, for instance, first love at first sight, you know, with a new baby, some people fall in love with a baby the minute they meet the baby, and some people, it's more like a slow burn. And reframing that and saying, well, it's like falling in love with an adult, isn't it? Some people is love at first sight, and some people is more of a slow burn. When you remove judgment out of situation where people judge themselves because they thought they ought to be like this, as opposed to feeling the way they are feeling now, you take a great step in healing mental health. But also the next step is people have struggling with postnatal depression. Then they need to seek help. And the problem is that seeking help requires to acknowledge you're struggling. And we still live in a culture that attaches a lot of stigma to postnatal, to mental health, period, you know, but postnatal mental health. That there's a, you know, in my book, I touched on it a little bit, but I didn't go into many details because, as you know, it's quite a small book. I actually wrote many more words than what I was allowed. The editor had to cut
it all down.
Written. I was thinking when she gave me the brief, oh, how am I going to write 40,000 words? And I actually wrote 50,000 words, and I could have carried on writing. But there's a book in the end section of my book. There's a whole further reading section, and I also refer to lots of the books in the book. And one book in the same collection as this one, written by a psychologist called Mia Scotland. It's called Why Postnatal Depression Matters. She goes in a much more depth about people's needs in terms of mental health. So I refer people to that because I think it's really important to, well, just acknowledge that you need help. You know, if we treated mental health the way we treat physical health, you know, like when you break your arm, nobody said, oh, well, if you think about it positively, your arm's going to get better. So we need that reframe, you know, we need people to be able to acknowledge that they're struggling, and also hook up with other people. So they don't feel so much like they're the only one who's struggling. Yes, there would be a lot of, in the book, I encourage health professionals to discuss that with people at antenators if they can, just mentioning that idea of the period of about a month of rest and being looked after and that stuff. Because the other side that I've not touched on is we live in a culture that prioritizes and values independence above everything else. And so in that respect, admitting that you can't cope by yourself in a society that thinks that coping by yourself is a sign of strength, that takes a lot of vulnerability.
Yeah.
And so again, help, you know, I've had so many friends who told me they went for their 6 weeks check with a GP, and before they went, they put full face on makeup on, and they dressed nicely and dressed their baby nicely and went and smiled, and the GP said, oh, I seem to be doing very well, when inside they said they felt they were dying.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're against, you know, we're against a society that doesn't normalize, doesn't like negative feelings. And I'm not talking about just postpartum or pregnancy or anything. I'm talking about across the board. We don't want to hear about the negative You know, we only want the, you know, it's like we only want the light, happy, we only want like a smile, you know, the kind of, it's like also why when, you know, that bollocks that you've, I'm sure, heard, you know, all that matters is a healthy baby, and how women are gaslighted out of their feel crap postpartum when they say, oh, I'm really sad about the way my birth went, and people say, but you should be happy because you have a healthy baby. It's like, God, you know, what bollocks. What a way to like, because you know, if
Totally
your baby's happy,
diminish the mother's feelings.
yeah,
It's just
the baby, you can be perfectly glad and grateful and happy that your baby is healthy and feel absolutely shit. Two completely different experiences.
when you sit with clients, do you find that they often haven't even thought about postnatal?
Yeah, not only I found that with clients, but what was really interesting is since getting ready to publish a book, I've had like, I don't know, something like 7 press articles and like 5 or 6 different podcasts and various interviews. And the number of times that the people interviewing me, not birth people, but like journalists, say to me, I've never heard of a postnatal recovery plan. I'm like, yeah, I know. That's why I wrote the book, because I want the concept of that to come through. You know, when I was saying postpartum is the Cinderella of the birth world, people prepare for birth, you know, like antenatal classes, but they don't prepare for the postpartum. People will invest in maybe postnatal, antenatal nurturing, like massage, because it's for the baby.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people will spend money on buying the baby doesn't need. All the toys, all the gadget, because again, there's a whole market that's making you feel like you're not a good parent if you don't buy the latest whatever they've invented, because there's so many things. It's like, it's just exponentially grows. When I did some research for the book, I found surveys showing that the amount of, I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but people spend enormous amounts on buying gear for their babies. Yeah. So the concept I like to bring is the idea of bringing gift towards the mother in the postpartum. And one really cool way of doing that, which I think is really beautiful, is to organize a mother blessing. Mm-hmm. And in the mother blessing, rather than a baby shower, which again is all about the baby doesn't give a fuck about toys and stuffed bears and small tiny baby girls that will be too big too small in 2 weeks. You know, the baby doesn't care. The baby wants parents who feel strong enough to support him or her. And so in that respect, encouraging people from pregnancy onwards to like direct the support towards the new parents is a really important frame, like shift that you need to encourage if you don't want people to keep buying you gifts that are just for the baby. So in the if you organize a mother blessing, you can do them on Zoom as well. I took part in some mother blessing on Zoom in 2020. You can ask people to give you pledges. You can make a list of, you know, as part of my postpartum, I would, you know, home cooked meal. Yeah, I would like, you know, to have vouchers towards a postnatal doula. I would like to have vouchers towards postnatal massage, towards seeing a bath, towards, you know, like all these kind of nurturing things that you might even know exist, because, you know, when you become a parent for the first time, there's all this world out there you don't know there. I remember when I was pregnant with my first child, somebody said, are you looking forward to going to a soft play area? I said, what's that? Why would you know us? You know, that kind of wonder world of all the stuff. Yeah, so I think it's really important to help people want to help you. People want to give you what you need, but if they don't know what you need, they're going to give you what they think you need, which might not be at all, especially in a culture that doesn't understand that it's better to give towards the mother.
I often bring up the idea of the meal train, of that instead of buying gifts, why don't you ask people to make you meals or vouchers towards your favorite takeaways and things like that. Yeah. And the parents are always like, I didn't think of that. That's amazing. That's
really, I know. If I would say one thing, Carly, I would say the meal train is probably the most important thing that you can do for new parents, because food It's really interesting. When you were saying I got fantastic feedback from the food, some of the feedback I get on like Facebook or Amazon or whatever, and people private message me. The ones that make my day the most is when I hear stuff like, because of your book, when my friend has a baby in 3 weeks, I'm going to make her like lasagna instead of buying flowers, And, this kind of reframing this kind of idea, like you say, if people don't know that that even exists as an option. So, if you can't home cook food because you might not live locally, there are companies that do those deliveries, like Cook, that delivers like frozen dishes you can just bang in the oven and they're ready. But the stories I really, really love is when people say it's more than the food, because people have said to me repeatedly that when they get given a dish that somebody has made for them, feels it's more than just food, isn't it?
Yeah.
Food that's been made with love for you. It's really interesting because I think, when people become doulas, I think it was always in them, that nurturing. And when I was pregnant with my son, I went to antenatal classes, and in this antenatal class, I made friends with a couple from the States who were living in Cambridge at the time. They had a very unexpected, super fast birth at 32 weeks pregnancy. And I went to visit them in the NICU, and I went and I brought beef bourguignon. Because even though I'd never been in hospital, I kind of had an idea that hospital food wasn't like the nicest tasting stuff there was, and that my heart broke because I still remember I was heavily pregnant with my own child, and there was this tiny baby, because 32 weeks are not big, and when I arrived, she'd been expressing milk and she just spilled what she'd been expressing. So she was crying and she was like upset and she was licking milk, and I just remember how, all the emotions. And this couple and they moved back to the States, but we're still friends. And a couple of years ago, they came back to Cambridge and they came to visit us. And she told me, I never forgot that out of all the people who came to visit you, were the only one that brought me a casserole.
Aww.
So don't underestimate when you make a dish for someone, even if you only make one dish, how much good it can do and how much that memory can stay with them for the rest of their life, that there was somebody who showed them love and care. And with showing love and care, it can also make you feel stronger, because suddenly you feel like you're worthy, because I don't know about you, but in my own experience of being a mum for the first time, and the experience of many of the clients that I support, not all, but is often you sort of judge yourself very harshly against some imaginary standard that you ought to think everybody should abide by, but you're not even conscious of that. So you're kind of only looking at what you're not kind of doing, that doesn't feel like you're a great mum because you're not doing X, Y, and Z. And when people come and show you care and love, they can go a long way to help you feel better, more, that's why I'm saying it's much more than food, It's
all encompassing of a support, and it's a hug. It's like a big hug, and that's very needed at the moment.
Yeah.
So where can people buy your book?
So there's several options that they can buy the book from. They can buy it from all the usual online retailers like Amazon, and the Book Depository, and all the main big publishers, sort of, bookshop online.
Put some links down in the comments so people
can. And they can buy it from the publisher, Pinter and Martin. I don't know if you can see Pinter and Martin there. And if they want a signed copy, then they can buy it directly from me on my website, sophiemessager.com.
And that's where they will find the postnatal plan as well.
That's where they'll find the postnatal plan. That's where they'll find the many, many blogs I've written on the topic. That's where they'll find the courses I'm creating based on the book. So I've got a course that's nearly ready. It's called Why Postnatal Recovery Matters. And I've got another course like that in a pipeline that's more aimed at birth workers, that will have a different angle, which will be how to help people, rather than the first course that's there at the moment is how to do it for yourself.
Right.
And I've got, lots and lots of free, like I said, lots of free blogs. I have an Instagram and I have a YouTube channel where, you know, I'm starting sharing more videos and things like that and doing lives and to try and, again, share the story, because the more people hear about the importance of the message that's in the book, what I'm hoping, the more we will get to transform the postpartum. And that's why I wrote it, because I want to see a change in the world. And I think the more people ask for, you know, saying, well, actually, I've made a postnatal recovery plan, and it will no longer be a weird thing that nobody's heard about. And then suddenly, when more people will have heard that actually your family's need is, you know, be meals and be nurtured and be supported in what they want, which is another thing I touch upon in the book. It's very important to be able to navigate conflicting advice that you've been getting from society at large, and being able to find your own voice and your own need in the middle of it. So yes, my hope is that in my lifetime I see a revolution. I want to see a revolution in the postpartum.
Thank you so much for writing the book, and thank you for talking with us today.